Welcome back, everyone. I'm Carrington-Russell, Australian award-winning author of Kick Butt Heroines and Dark Romantic Worlds, and I have a very special guest for you today. We are talking to a USA Today and New York Times best-selling author known for her multi-genre romance. We, of course, are talking to the one and only Tillie Cole. How are you today?
I'm good. Are you?
Oh, I'm so good. Better now that you're on with a bit of a lost voice I'm hearing because we've been singing all night.
Yeah, like I say, it's partly jet lag and part singing to Noah Khan in concert last night.
Oh
So yeah,
no.
a wee bit croaky, but we're good. We're good.
Well, I love your dedication for being on here, so thank you. And we have heaps to go over because you just had a release last month. So
Mhm.
before we dive into how awesome that has been, because I've been seeing all the photos and the signings and everything that's been happening, I want you to take me back to the start of your writing career. What made you want to write a book in the first place, and how did you find publishing for the first time?
I had absolutely no dreams of being an author whatsoever. I didn't even know I could write at all. So I always say, like most authors you speak to are like, I got my first journal at 4 years old, and I knew that wasn't me. I was a really, really avid reader though my entire life, and I think really it's almost like you're doing research without realizing you're doing research. Do you get what I mean? It's like, so I used to just inhale books, and then my husband was a professional rugby player, and I was a teacher, a high school teacher, for quite a few years. And long story short, he retired and got a job opportunity in Canada. So we went over there. And when I got there, my English teaching qualification didn't translate. So I had to do a bit more extra study before I could get a job. But before that, I had to wait for my spousal visa, which was meant to take only 3 months, and it took 10. And so when I was there, I just wasn't allowed to work. And he was working 12 hours a day. All my friends that I'd made out there through previous visits, they all worked during the day. So I was just like, there's only so much like jogging and coffee trips you can do before you're just bored out your mind. So I would just read constantly. And jokingly, my husband said, "You're going to bankrupt us at this point." This was before KU. This was like right at the beginning of like indie publishing. Like there was a few things out, so like E.L. James, Colleen Hoover, Abby Glines, those kind of authors were already out. I had no idea what indie publishing or anything was. I was just reading these books. And then I started thinking, I think I could probably write a book if I tried. And I was like, why not? I've got all this time. I'm just going to give it a shot. So, yeah, 6 weeks later, I had a book. The first draft of that book was absolutely horrific. I just remember it being really bad. But I had some friends that were really strong in that area, in that world. So they kind of like guided me through. And then I was like, what do I do with it now? And then I started reading up on independent publishing. First release I ever had, it was like this little British rom-com. And it did pretty well, really, for what it was. But I was terrible at what I did with it in publishing, if you get what I mean. So, like, I had no idea about back then, it was like blog tours and just like even like I didn't even have like social media really. So I just kind of put it out, and then it did fairly well for being absolutely no planning to it whatsoever. So then I wrote Sweet Home after that, which was kind of my breakout book. And in between that release and the second one, I kind of studied on how to do it a little bit. And then that was it really. That ended up going in the top 20 of Amazon. So that one, that was it really. That was the start of it. And I was like, and it went USA Today bestseller. And I was like, all right.
What year was book one?
2013.
2013. So it was a different time back then. I would say a
Uh,
little bit easier for
literally.
organic reach as well. So
Totally. Like I always say there was like I always joke to my husband saying there was three waves of original indie authors. so you had like E.L. James and Colleen and that in the first wave. Second was some of my friends like Claire Contreras, S.L. Jennings, like those kind of authors. And then there was like myself, um, Corinne Michaels, like we kind of came out that time. And I always think those initial, like 2010 to 2013 was kind of like the first kind of wave. Sorry, my cat's meowing at my door. Um, yeah, and it was just a completely different world. Like I don't even recognize the industry from then till now.
First year I published 2014, so not too far off. So I remember those
Uh,
days, the good old days.
mm,
And
yeah.
how did you go? Because it was more so then, especially that expectation of an indie author that it was less, or it wasn't a
Mm.
final product, or it wasn't, if you weren't traditionally published, then you weren't a real author. There was a lot of that stigma around at that time. So, how did you navigate that?
Yeah, there was. I remember even like people in my life kind of think like going, well, who's your publishing house? And I was like, just Amazon. And they were like, I don't even know what that means. And then when people started finding out, it was a bit like, um, oh, you're not a proper author then. And especially being a romance, there's a real weird stigma about that as well. Like, honestly, like the amount of times I've had to bite my tongue around people, ready to tear their heads off about what they're saying about romance. I feel like it comes from a place of misogyny, if I'm going to be honest. A lot of the time it's from men. And the kind of like, they expect you to be like a Dan Brown or a James Patterson or something. You know what I mean? Like someone, and when you say romance, they go, oh. And you're like, that's fine because I'm not writing for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm like, and they would say back then, like, how are you able to afford a life? And I was like, this is my full-time job. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can make a living off this. It was just, I think because it was so unknown and people's kind of first instinct is to kind of be negative about it. But I am stubborn. So for me, it was just kind of like, well, I'm just going to stick in and do it. And I like the freedom that came with being an indie author. It wasn't long, actually. I think, was it 2014? I accepted my first traditional publishing deal. And it was so different for me that I actually hated it back then. I actually thrive on it now. It's so funny. I think that's just people change, don't they? But I really felt it was difficult back then because I was so used to the indie world of being able to write what I want when I want. Um, and I like the quick turnaround too. They're writing a book in a year in advance. It's quite funny when that year comes around because you've completely moved on like to another book. And I am so ditzy that I was like, I don't even remember what the book's about at this point. So yeah.
How did you then go with the exponential growth? Because going from book one, where people enjoyed the rom com, to book two, where you're going top 20 Amazon, which is an awesome feat. But then you're
Yeah.
like, what do I do now? Like everything changes very quickly, and then you have more pressure to do better than the previous book. How did you go
Mhm.
navigating and then realizing, oh, this is a business? Like there's all these things that I have to put in place. How did you deal with that?
My husband does the business side. I'm going to be very honest about that. Like even now I write and I can tinker around on social media, but like even my whole team at this point, they always tag him in everything because, I am very like, sometimes I'm not sure how I've even got this career because I think if it was me on my own, I'd have buried myself by now, quite honestly. So, like, I think having people around you that actually know the business. It's like my agent's amazing. My publishing team's that now are, my PR team is. And my husband literally, like that's his full-time job for the most part. He is like my business manager now. And back then he worked full time, obviously. So he was kind of like, doing his full time job. And then he was like, I think this could be like a real business for you. And I'm like, yeah, I just want to write stories. And he was like, well, you write stories and you let me take care of this side. So I think for me, I am not a girl boss and all of that jazz. It's just not who I am. And that's okay. Like, I love writing, and I'm lucky enough that between me and my husband and my team now, it's kind of a machine that it's well oiled at this point. So it allows me to just do fun stuff like this without worrying about tax forms or, contracts. So like all my team goes over that. So I'm very fortunate that I was very lucky at an early start to get people around me who actually cared about me and not just money or what I could do for them. I think your husband doing it as well, it's like it's your thing together, you know? So it impacts him and me, it's our life. And like we were discussing off camera, but we've been together since we were at school. He was a professional rugby player where I followed him around for a decade. So it was kind of like, right, it's your turn. It's your turn now to do something for me.
I love though how supportive he has been from the start. And
Yeah.
that's why I want to pull you up real quick. And you said, I'm not a girl boss. Wrong. I am gonna no, I'm not gonna accept that because you are. But what I love about this is it also shows that over time you have delegated, you found your strengths, you identified what they were, and then you outsourced elsewhere, which I think is really important in this business because as you continue to grow, it's one very exhausting, but also if you're constantly hammering away at the things that you don't enjoy, you're gonna lose love for it. So
Yeah.
you just it sounds like it was actually a very for somebody who didn't really think they wanted to write in the first place, it was a very obvious and clear path for you.
It's funny because like I obviously get asked a lot of people who are aspiring to be authors or they want to further their career. And honestly, like sometimes I feel like I'm the worst person to ask because I don't know, with Sweet Home, I think the tropes of it or whatever were just, I feel like I've had a lot of luck. And I know people say you don't make your own luck. Sorry, there's no such thing as luck, like you make your own destiny. And I do agree with that. But for whatever reason, I've had a few books in my career that have just blown up that kind of thrust me further along. And I don't actually know necessarily why they did. Do you see what I mean? It was like sometimes I think it was just the right trope at the right time, or the right blogger at the time who were, huge bloggers got hold of it and their reach was huge. And then suddenly my books flew up the charts and I'm like, who's reviewed this? I don't know who's reviewed, like, and that tended to happen. So it's kind of it was a lot of hard work. I mean, that was pre-children, and I would write some days for 18 hours. Like I was so addicted to it. Some years I was writing 6 books a year, which is I can't even imagine doing that now. I never like went out. I was just for like 3 or 4 years, I was just consumed by it, which was probably unhealthy because I think I burnt out a little bit. Where now I actually have a much, well, I have to because I have kids now, but I have a better work-life balance. Um, and it's funny because, but then I think if I hadn't have done that at the beginning, I'm not sure I'd be where I am now. It's a funny thing to reflect on as well.
One thing that I find really common on here actually is that, and I swear there's a bit of a formula at the start, and we use the word formula lightly here, but
Yeah.
when people get into this career, they're just so obsessed with it. And so it, as you said, 2, 3 years, it's like, oh my gosh, you smash out all of these books and then you begin to slow down. And I think this really catches people off guard as well, because they're like, I don't understand. I could smash out 10,000 words a day, but now I can only do five. And that's
Yeah.
completely normal. And we need to normalize that situation because
Yeah.
if you continue at that pace, you are going to burn out as well. And you also, as you said, you started having children and such, things start changing. So, what were some of the conversations that you had with yourself? Those really hard conversations where you're like, actually, I love this, but I need to take a step back. I need to prioritize my health. I need to prioritize my family. What were some of the conversations that you were having with yourself to make sure that you just didn't implode?
Yeah, my husband pulled me up quite quickly. Again, we're very honest with each other. And he was like, I'm so appreciative of how hard you're working, but he said workaholic at this point is not even the word. Like you are missing, like I started missing like friends' birthdays and stuff. And I really value my friends and family. So it was kind of like I honestly, it was like an addiction. It was so bizarre. Like I look back now and I feel like I was a different person. Like I just loved like this community and sharing. I don't know, I was just so consumed by it and I just loved it. And it truly wasn't like, it wasn't financial gain or anything to that. Because anyone who knows me knows that's not even a motivation for me. I think I just loved, and because like you, when you introduced me, you said I cross genres, which I do. I think because I was writing so many different genres, I kind of had split readership. So I had some readers that read everything. And then I had some readers that like my lighter stuff and some that like my darker stuff. So I was very aware of that as well. So like I wanted to make sure that I got a couple of books a year out for the lighter readers, a couple of books for the darker readers. And yeah, so it was I've also found out I've got ADHD, which is a recent thing. Although the signs, everyone's like, yeah, I was like, yeah, yeah. The signs have been there for a very long time. But I actually think I was kind of hyper fixating on what I was doing. I think I was so obsessed in it. And truly, like the time that I stood back was when I got pregnant. And I had quite a difficult pregnancy. I found out I had underactive thyroid, and that was really impacting my pregnancy. And then I got preeclampsia. So I had to go on like bed rest, and then I had an emergency C-section. And it was just a wake-up call of you're not invincible. You now have a little tiny life that needs you to be here. And just the reality of having a baby, and I just physically couldn't do it. I was so tired all the time. And then it became nice because it became a luxury to write and it became a hobby again rather than a business again. And I think it's kind of stayed that way. Like writing again is my home. It's my little world to get away from the craziness that is life. So I think just, circumstances change and I just got older. I mean, this is my 11th year publishing. Um, yeah, which is brilliant because I know not a lot of people, a lot of people fell away over the year, just not for anything, but industries change. It's very difficult to keep on top of all the new changes and all the platforms you have to be on to try and be, successful. And it becomes really hard, especially if you're an indie author, because everything you used to do, it's tenfold. Which is probably why I'm moving more into traditional as well, because it's as where I'm at in my life now, it suits me better.
I love that. And you're definitely correct. Like, adaptability is something that you need within this industry because it is ever changing. And the thing is a lot of us didn't necessarily start off with this knowledge. We're learning as we go. We're still
Yeah.
to this day. And so I'm kind of intrigued then because you have just had a release, which is a book to one of your bestsellers a couple of years later. So A Thousand Broken Pieces has just come out, and it is book two in A Thousand Boy Kisses. A bit of a tricky one, I think, really, considering how much success book one had. Were you nervous about releasing book two, and was there any obstacles you had while writing it?
When I wrote A Thousand Boy Kisses, and there is trigger warnings here about terminal illness and stuff, so just giving your readership there a heads up. Your readership, that's not even what this is it? Your
It's whoever
viewers.
you, to the world, to the world.
So I wrote that. It was so left field at that point to write a YA, especially a tearjerker YA, which was very fade to black, nothing smutty or spicy or nothing. I was very much at that point, pretty much predominantly a dark romance author of very dark books. And that was kind of becoming my real kind of USP, I suppose. And then we just had a lot of cancer in my family, a lot of cancer. And so my parents and my grandparents all had it at the same time. And I have a very small family, so it was kind of like we didn't, we joke now, it was a bit like the Hunger Games. We did not know who was going to survive that year.
That's so
And it was literally like, it was awful. It was just one of the worst periods of my life. And we lost my grandparents both, and luckily my mum was cured, so that was amazing. But my dad had an incurable cancer, but he had different types of treatment that allowed him to live as long as they could keep the cancer suppressed somewhat. But you know, he was living essentially knowing he had a life limiting disease, which as the daughter for that was also really difficult because you're always like, when is this gonna, you know? And I'm a total daddy's girl, so it was really rough. And I suffer from chronic anxiety, particularly health anxiety, which is for obvious reasons, I think. And I just, you know, the best way I knew how to express it, I suppose, was in a book. And I knew I didn't want it in any like dark situation. I wanted to give it the kind of care and the respect that such a disease would have. You know, I didn't want to put it in any kind of inflammatory way. So I always loved YA. It's one of my favorite genres to read, always has been. And I was like, and I was just, we were living in Texas at the time. And I said, we went out on a drive and I said to my husband, I've got this, it just came to me. I've got this idea for a book and it's about two teenagers. I don't know why, but one of them's from Norway. And I was like, but it's set in America. And I said, it's based around the theory of a cherry blossom tree. And I was like, just, you know, letting my mind do its crazy thing that it does. And I said, but it's essentially about cancer. And essentially, A Thousand Boy Kisses was my family's story through a fictional narrative, if you like. And so when it was done, it was like, that's done. I'll never do anything like that again. I've exercised those kind of thoughts, those feelings. And then 2 years ago, my dad finally passed away. So I wrote Thousand Boy Kisses in 2016, and it had huge success at the time. And then, like most indie books do, it kind of, you know, teetered off. And people who then go read your back catalogue found it, and I would always get messages about it, always. You know, we had thick film interest, but they died out. There was lots of different back and forths, and I never even thought anything about it. And then it blew up again through Book Talk, which I didn't even know what TikTok was at the time. And it was people saying, how old are you? Get on social media and figure this out. Anyway, and then my dad died 2 years after that. And it was just like the worst grief I've ever felt in my life. It was just awful. And I genuinely just didn't know how to function. And again, my husband was like, well, how could you, do you think you can write about it somehow? Because it worked really well when you wrote Boy Kisses. And I said, well, yeah, because like I could write a book about grief, because not to spoil the first one, but there's room for a book about grief after the first one, put it this way. So I started thinking about some of the characters left behind in the first book. And I just stuck on the main character in the last book's her little sister. And I just started toying with this idea, started throwing around some chapters, you know, just seeing where it led. Spoke to my agent and she was like, let's do this. Like, and I was like, I did have expectations of it, not expectations. There was like, I was very nervous because how did I follow that book? Because that kind of stuck on a life of its own. But it's such a different book and I wrote it for a different reason that I almost didn't care. It was for like, I don't know, if you felt broken by the first one, I kind of wanted this one to put you back together a little bit and hopefully put me back together by the end of it. And I really think I did it. I really think I did it. And the feedback I've got over this last month has been just so gorgeous. And yeah. So I am really proud of it because out of both books, the second one's probably the most personal.
How scary is that, though, putting so much of yourself? Because, you know, there's a little bit of ourselves that we put in every book, but to put something that's so raw and meaningful to you into a book, that must have been also terrifying to hand over to anyone.
Mhm.
Because they would hear
I
your
think,
inner thoughts.
yeah, because in the first book, every major kind of dramatic scene is based on one of my family members. And in the second book, Savannah, the main character, her grief is my grief, essentially. Um, and, you know, it's tough because if I saw, and I have seen plenty of negative reviews, for, especially for the first one, because, you know, that's life. And sometimes they hit you hard because you're like, that was my life. Like, that is my life. But at the same time, it's also people's experience. If they've never gone through anything like that before, maybe they just don't understand, or maybe their experience with loss and grief was extremely different. There's lots of different things. So, like people's relationships with family members who've died, you don't know what that is like, with a positive, with a negative. And sometimes they might read that book and go, "Oh, it's too fluffy." Well, that's because I was extremely close to my family. So for me, it's true. It might sound fluffy and maybe a bit like idealistic, but I have a gorgeous family who I adore. So for me, losing a family member is that hard for me. And with the second book, again, it addresses, I tried to hit on lots of type of grief, not just my own, like lots of, especially the 5 stages and stuff like that. And again, maybe if you don't see yourself in one of them characters or whatever, I can understand maybe you wouldn't get it. Or, there is a line in the book I've talked about quite a lot now at signings for this book, which is, it's 4 years on for the main girl, and she says to her love interest in it, people think after 4 years you should be able to move on. And he says, well, those people need to count themselves lucky because they've obviously never been through it. And it's true. Like sometimes I think you need to walk through these paths to understand sometimes certain books. And I think maybe Boy Kisses and Broken Pieces are that.
Yeah.
I think it'll resonate if you've walked that path.
And I bet your family is really proud of these books, particularly. Did they read it?
My sister will never read either.
Yeah.
So yeah, and now the first book's coming to Netflix, which is amazing. And she's told me she will fully support me, but she'll never watch it either. And I do get it because she walked it with me.
Yeah.
So she will recognize the scenes as who it was in our family. And it's just the way everyone deals with it. My mum does read them. She's obviously it was her husband, and she's struggling with Broken Pieces. She's reading a chapter at a time and then putting it down because she said she's sobbing because she recognizes what I'm saying in it, you know. Um, so she'll get there. So she's gradually reading that, but she said to me, I can't read it like I would a normal book because she said this is just our life. And I was like, yep. So I totally get it. But all my best friends have read it, and it's nice because I think it gives them a little insight as to how we're still feeling, you know. So I think they go, "Oh, I didn't know that about you," and you're like, "Yeah, well, you mask it, don't you? There's a lot of things you just don't, you know." I think it gives people um, a bit of a pass to grieve their own circumstances in life, no matter what that is. Reading something like this,
And I imagine
so
it's
yeah.
created you've already got an intimate readership, but you've now created a safe space as well for people who
Yeah.
have been impacted by that to discuss it as well, which is really powerful.
Very like I've done quite a few signings, and especially since the first book, but the second one particularly, I've just done obviously a tour in North America, and um it's amazing how many I was just crying with the readers, like one on one, and they were telling me their grief stories, and they were telling me stories of loss, and that's quite heavy to get, but at the same time there's a there's an understanding there. It's two people who've experienced loss going, oh, I understand you and you understand me. And that doesn't always translate in everyday life because luckily some people haven't experienced loss yet. Or, they've experienced the kind of expected losses as you age, but they haven't necessarily lost like parents yet, or, guardians who were huge kind of caretakers in your life. So it's just this gorgeous like community that we've kind of got. And some of my friends like, is it not too heavy? I was like, no, because I've put this out there anyway. I'm quite an open book. I'm obviously very extroverted, and I never used to talk about my grief at all. And I realized how much of a disservice that was to myself because, I was kind of keeping so much in. I think it was making me worse with anxiety and things. And actually, since writing these type of books, I don't know, it's kind of like freeing in a way.
Well, speaking
Yeah.
of freeing, Netflix. I'm so excited for you. What was, first of all, tell me about the moment when you found out, how you celebrated, but I'd also love to know if you have any advice for anyone who's looking at agents, publishers, TV and film, all the good stuff, do's and don'ts in your opinion.
So it was the beginning of last summer. Netflix contacted my agent and they were interested. And again, we've been here a few times before, not with Netflix, but with like other studios and stuff. So as excited as I was like, been here, nothing came of it. So, and then I was out in America last year, and then one of the executives came and met with me, which was a step I'd never done before. So I was like, okay. And it was very positive, and it was very like the language was very much, let's try and make this happen. I was like, okay, can I get excited? Yeah, I'm not sure. And just very so Netflix they release it, but they don't give you a production team, if you like. So we would have needed a producer. And as luck would have it, a producer called David Hoberman, who has done some of the, like, he's been involved in some of the biggest films like Beauty and the Beast, Pretty Woman, Dead Poets Society, Beaches, like just insane movies. And it's so funny because Beaches was my nana's favorite film ever. And obviously it's a tearjerker. So when it was the first film he told me he'd produced, and when you just get like shivers because you go, oh, is this Nana? Like, is this my Nana sentence?
Yeah.
I was like, it's so weird because she never got to see this, and she was a huge romance reader in the family. She was the person who got me into reading romance. And she was like my best friend. And Poppy's Nana in the book in A Thousand Boy Kisses was based on my Nana. So it was very like, and so long story short, his daughter was reading A Thousand Boy Kisses, and he heard her crying and went into the room, and he thought something was wrong. And she said, no, it's this book, Dad, you need to read this book. And he read it in a couple of days, and he contacted my agent and said, I want to make this film. So Netflix and David came just very serendipitously at the same time. And he's a huge established producer with a huge amount of respect in Hollywood. So, and then he obviously has directors he's worked with and stuff. And that's where Stephen Chbosky and his wife Liz, she's my screenwriter, and Stephen, who did Perks of Being a Wallflower and Beauty and the Beast and stuff, he's directing it. So it all started just weirdly slotting together. And I would like to say that apart from doing Zoom meetings with these people and expressing why I wrote the book, similar to what we're doing now, I didn't do anything. So in terms of like finding, how do you get, a lot of people say, how did you get your book, a film deal? And it's like, it was my agent and my film agent. So I had film agents as well now. And they are just the best team. And truly they've taken care of it. So it was all just, David had done Beaches, and he said, let's make another tearjerker that's like that. And I was like, yes, let's do it. There needs to be one. Since Fault in Our Stars, I feel like there hasn't really been another one. So yeah, it was hugely exciting. And then obviously I had to sit on it for months and months and months and not be able to tell anybody because we were waiting for everything to be, signed off. And then yeah, it got leaked. So I was able to jump on and tell everybody. So yeah, and then I have obviously with advice to writing. I don't know, like nowadays, I honestly don't know how I would start a career. Like the industry now is so different, which is awful because I feel like I have archaic advice, probably, which is quite difficult. And also I've moved quite heavily into the traditional publishing sphere now. I will always do indie books because there's certain books of mine I would never want to put out trad because, darker stuff especially. Um, I think for me, my agent's always been a huge part of my career She's always the one who's really looked after me. I've had the same agent now for 10 years. She found me at the beginning of my career again, it through Sweet Home actually, when that went big. So it's kind of like I feel like I'm a bit of a bad author for that because a lot of things have just come to me. So I would say though is right for you, and I know that sounds people might think it's vague and cliche, but it's true. Don't copy somebody else's style. You know, write the stories you want to write, or I think your readership's never authentic. I
Yeah.
think people can suss out a pretender who's just in it to make money. You know, if you want to make books and it can be anything from rom-com to thriller to tearjerkers to dark romance, I think as long as you're true to the voice that you have, your unique voice. And the other thing is, I would say the market's not saturated. That's a big thing people get told. I just think with KU and the readership now, people are reading 1 or 2 books a day sometimes. And it's like no author can write that fast
Correct.
to keep up with the demand for it. So I think that puts a lot of new authors off, and I would say absolutely not. You know, you never know what trope's going to be the next big thing, or you need one video to go viral on TikTok, and you've got a bestseller.
It still blows my mind. I'm sure it blows your mind too, coming from the, I'll say 2010 days where imagining that one post could go viral and just like flip some people's careers. Like it's
Yeah,
just so wild. And again, it'll change in the next couple of years to something else. So
exactly. Yeah.
change with that. But it's interesting as well as you're saying, like you feel like everything's, come to you and it like it's been that element of luck, but also you've been doing all the hard work that you
Mm.
should be doing in the first place. You have focused on your books and you've focused on your brand, which is the most important. And I think at times we can sometimes forget that because we're like, why me? Why am I not the chosen one? But if you're focusing on all these other things that are happening and not on the core of actually writing and producing books, then you're kind of missing out on your biggest business opportunity and presentation, which is your backlist and who you are as an author as well. Because even if you're looking into going into trad, they're looking at like, unfortunately, your social medias, like how many people, how many followers do you have? Are you going to be able to market yourself? So I think there's a lot of that that's involved as well. So I don't think that they just found you. I think that you put a lot of hard
No, yeah.
with
And
skills.
I think like I said to you before, I'm a very open book, and I actually think that's really helped with my readership. Like, I'm the same person I was back then. Like, I feel like I've not changed whatsoever. Like, I've never, ever, truly, I've never let success go to my head because I get panicky about retaining my career. So it's kind of like, I feel like I never take it for granted because I'm always like, is this the year? I'm like, where? So it's kind of like, I love meeting readers, and I have a lot of readers that have been with me since like the first book. And I just feel like I haven't changed. And I think they like that as well. Like, I think they see that my passion for writing is greater than my passion for business. And that everything I write is not a cash grab, or it's not a calculated business move. I'm writing stories that I truly want my readers to get something from.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's so funny because I think no matter what genre I'm writing, emotion is the top thing that comes out of every book I write. There's always a point in most books where you're going to get teary. And I think that's just because I'm a very emotional person. So I think it naturally comes through. So I think when people read my books, it's kind of like they jokingly say, "I'm taking a day off work for this one," and I'm like, I love that though because it's like they get what I'm trying to put out. Do you get what I
I
mean?
love it. You're
So
just
I
like,
think
it will break you. That is your ambition for every book.
I say to my husband, I'm not writing a tearjerker. I'm not going to write anything that makes anyone cry. And then I'll start writing one of my dark books, and I say to him, "I think I might be making people cry." He's
Page
like, "But
three.
And I was like, I don't know why I do it, but I think it just shows like how deeply involved with the books I get. And I think that's kind of, like I go on social media and just talk. And it's just like having a conversation because, like I'm so appreciative of my readership. Like truly, truly, that's not me just saying that. Like they've literally changed my entire life. And even in the bad times, they've been so sweet and so supportive. And, there's been times in my career where I have wanted to quit, and it's those people that have reached out and been like, no, you do have a place at the table, and please don't go and stuff. And it's just nice. I don't know, it's nice to feel like you have a community that actually cares about you and not just your books as well. Like, to see the author behind the words, not just the words, you know?
I think too, there comes a point in a lot of people's careers in this industry or just even in general, but the moment when you need to ask for help, which can be very difficult at times because you don't want to show vulnerability, you don't want to show that you're not sure what's happening right now. But the moment that you ask fellow authors or readers or just say, hey, it's really hard right now and I don't know what I'm doing and I just need help. And I think that's a moment that you really get to reappreciate the industry because you're so shocked by the amount of support that you genuinely have. And I think that we shouldn't take that for granted. So if you ever do need help, just ask for it because there are people there to support you.
Yeah.
Um, I'm kind of curious, actually, what has been the most surprising thing you found in this industry?
I think the camaraderie probably with other authors as well. Like, I don't have a huge amount of like deep friendships in this industry, um, bar a few, which I treasure, but just how supportive, like, it does sound awful because I'm such a champion of women, but I've also grown up being like a dancer and a performer and stuff. And a lot of that time, those communities could be very toxic and very competitive. And I think when I stepped into the romance space, which is dominated by women, there was a part of me going, what's this like? Is this we're going to stab you in the back? And it's truly been the opposite, which is so nice because I know there's always drama and there's always stuff in any walk of life. I mean, I was a teacher for years, and the staff room and the teachers lounge, there was more drama going on in amongst the teachers than I've ever found in publishing. So it's kind of like, it's just, for the most part, it's just, even if it's just internet friends, you follow each other on Instagram and you just say congrats on your release, or they say it back, it's reciprocated. And just like people, it's so lovely to see another author going, oh, Tillie's had this release last week, go check it out. And, just throw it up on a story or something. And it's like, that's gorgeous, actually. Like, what a lovely thing to do, because their readership might go, Tillie who? And then you've got another readership there. It's just, I think it's nice the way everyone has each other's back. Like, even just watching Colleen with It Ends With Us at the minute, doing all that publicity, like, I'm so proud of her. Like, I know her a little bit. She's a really sweet woman, but you just get this pride, like BB Easton getting her series on Netflix, and just like Anna Todd when After came out. I know Anna, I know BB, I know Colleen. Just like, there's no jealousy, which is surprising actually, because you think, oh, would you be envious? And when I announced the Netflix stuff, just how lovely. And even just like hit New York Times and stuff last week with Broken Pieces, and people sharing it and stuff. Like, yeah, that is so sweet, because that's my career that's happening, and my readership's obviously hugely supportive. But I think if you're a fellow author, you know what those kind of achievements can mean. I don't know. Yeah, so I'd like to think it wasn't surprising, but I suppose I didn't know what to expect. But I didn't expect just how actually lovely and welcoming it could be.
One thing too with this industry, and also I think the reason why we absolutely are so excited when we see that, because their success is our success. They are
Yeah.
paving the way. They're showing us that the industry is changing again, that from say 10 years ago when you were titled an indie author and people were like, oh, you mustn't be producing quality books, to now being on the big screen. These things can happen for any of us,
Yeah.
and it's really paving the way, and it's so inspiring, and we love woman power, so let's go.
Yeah. Truly, like, romance is one of the biggest selling genres in the world, yet it's one of the most kind of frowned upon. And it blows my mind because it's like, look around you. Look at what romance is doing right now. Like, look at the readership on Book Talk, on Bookstagram. They are screaming about these books. And it doesn't matter what kind of book it is, whether it's deep down emotional or a rom-com or a dark romance. We're all getting airtime um, and respect now that we never used to get. And it's like you just can frown about it all you want, or say to people, oh, she doesn't write real books, she only writes, filthy sex scenes or whatever. And it's like, well, you can say what you want. At the end of the day, they're selling and people love them. So you can look down on romance all you want because we're not, making these really interesting thriller type books. But we're making books that women, especially, and I just did a signing in Dallas and I had quite a few men there. And
Oh,
I was thinking, oh, they'll be the husbands or the boyfriends. No, they weren't. They were in book clubs. And I was like, that is such a turn. I've never seen that before. And I was so happy. I was saying to them, I love that you're here. And they were asking me questions in the Q&A that were really thought out questions. And I was like, this is amazing. Like we're actually crossing over now. So it's kind of like the last 10 years from what we come from to where we are now, what's another 10 years going to look like? Like, yeah, we deserve the respect, I think, because we're really paving a way in this genre. So I love it.
smashing goals. I forgot to
Yeah.
ask before, are you a plotter or a pantser?
Cancer.
I thought so after talking to you. I was like, I'm hearing that chaotic ADHD kind of thing. I'm hearing pantser.
Chaos. I am. That's what my husband says. You're a lovable, chaotic person. I was like, yeah, that's kind of what I'm like. No, I kind of have a skeleton. Missing quite a few bones, but there's a somewhat frame there, and then I just sit down. I just go with it, and so a lot of the times I think a book's going one way and it'll just pivot. But I trust myself now. That's another thing that's come with like age and just being in the industry. I still suffer hugely from imposter syndrome,
Really?
but not as much as like, oh yeah, I do. I'm really hard on myself. I have quite low self-confidence, which I don't think people would get. Um, but yeah, I sometimes I'm writing going, what am I doing? And like my editors must think I need pandering through it all because I'm like, is this bad? Is it really bad? And they're like, will you shut up? So, oh yeah, pantser to the max.
I love
Probably the biggest pantser you've ever seen.
that. Absolutely love it both. It works and it flows, and you know your process, trust the
Yeah,
process.
yeah.
So, what have you then found has been your greatest challenge and your greatest accomplishment for you personally in your career so far?
I do struggle, and I think this now we know it's to do with like the ADHD and stuff more. Like, I'm terrible at like motivation and leaving things like I'm terribly unorganized, and sometimes that can cause me huge stress, especially now I'm in traditional world where, Douglas Adams, who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide, it was one of my dad's favorite books, and we were laughing at one of his quotes because he said, oh, I love deadlines. I love it when they float right past me. That's me. So it's kind of like, or I love to see them, I wave at them or something when they pass by, and I was like, that's me. So it's kind of like, in terms of nothing in terms of like writing per se on my books is kind of a negative, but my self-organization is absolutely woeful. And I am striving to do better, and I'm sure one day I will, but it is who I am. Yeah, exactly. I just say
As
this, I
long
was
as you
like,
try.
my husband just says, own it, this is who you are. Everyone knows who works with you, what you like. He said, you apologize constantly. He said, I think you just need to ride with it now. I was like, yeah. And what was the other bit? Sorry.
And your greatest accomplishment.
Just being here, I think, after 11 years and having such a like gorgeously loyal readership. Like obviously the film and the New York Times and the Sunday, all the accolades are amazing and these new opportunities that are coming. But like we said at the beginning, you know, I started writing books in this industry when the industry looked completely different. And I just know so many authors who just went, do you know, I love writing, but I can't do this. Like, this is so different now. And I don't know again, book talk. I wasn't even on TikTok when my book went viral. So it's that thing again where I've just been very fortunate in certain circumstances. And I get it. I get the book stands on its own. So it's kind of, is it luck? I know that, but I think, and obviously it resonated with people and that's why it went viral. But yeah, I'm just appreciative 11 years in to be here and still being able to keep up with the current market and hopefully, can, and again, I think that's your loyal readership because they follow you, they go with you. And I think if you can build a community, you know, I'd have been happy being an indie author my whole life. That is the truth. Like I would have been happy just bopping along like I was for the last whatever. And obviously my careers took me in a different path. But I'm just grateful that I'm still here 11 years on, as you probably are as well. Like, it's it can be a it can be a tough industry, but I think being here still is like a massive achievement.
I'm feeling all inspired. I'm feeling all the feels.
Oh.
I I have a segment called Speed Dating with an Author. So I've lit a candle, I created ambience, but basically what it is 5 rapid questions. Are you ready?
I am.
All right. What is the clumsiest moment you've ever had?
Oh my gosh. I mean, literally, there's a list. I used to be at theatre school and I fainted on stage. That was fun. Yeah. Fell down my stairs in my old house. That was another one. I mean, that's just a recent one. But I am very clumsy. Like my husband always jokingly calls me clumsy sexy. Like on romantic films where a girl's clumsy and they're like, oh, that's endearing. And people go, why are they always clumsy? And I was like, because some of us are. So, I mean, yeah, any given day, I will have a clumsy moment. So there's
It's so
that.
fascinating that you see like ankle goes and you're just gone into the bush just randomly. There she goes. Bye, Tillie.
My best friends will tell you, I was just walking along. We took our kids to a park and we're just walking along like you know, a little path through some trees. I just went over on my ankle and ended up on the floor. And the kids were absolutely dying laughing to the point where my son's friends still say to me, do you remember when you fell off? Yes. For no reason, I just fell over. And my friends were literally like, they're nearly weeing themselves. They were laughing that much. And they went, what happened? I was like, life.
Every
Just my
day.
everyday. Yeah.
What would be the 3 words that best describe you?
Um, bubbly, chaotic, happy.
I love that. Who
Yeah.
has been your favorite character to write and why?
Oh, oh my gosh. I think it was my favorite character. So probably it would be a couple rather than one. Is that okay?
I'll allow it.
Probably Styx and May from the first book in my Hangman series called It Ain't Me, Babe. They just like, I don't know, there was something about those characters and it really took my career in a positive segue. But they're like still to this day probably my favorite couple to write.
You think it's like the banter or something between them, or there was just
Oh
like
no, there's no no, it's quite so I studied religion at university and my specialism was cults and she escapes a cult in it and he is a head of a biker gang and he has a disabling stutter, so he's a voluntary mute, so he signs and just like they were very they met as children. This is not spoiling it, this is literally the prologue. They met as children very briefly while she was still very much in the cult, which was it's based on a real cult, which I don't publicly say which one because it still exists, but it had a very bad past of abuse and such to its members, especially children. So it's a really deep, and it allowed me to put all of my kind of academic learning and people I'd met and listened to talk, ex-cult members and stuff, and some that were still in cults that were cults or new religious movements as they're now called. And it was just that thing of like, it was loosely based on Hades and Persephone, myth, like lore kind of. And it was just the first time I wrote a book that I was like, oh, this is me.
Yeah.
Like, my friends and family were like, oh, this is you. I was like, I know. Because like I always joke, because as much as I'm like quite a happy, bubbly person, I love like spooky, dark stuff. Like Halloween's like my favorite, and I really like the kind of macabre side of life. I'm not like it, I'm fascinated by it. Like it just fascinates me. My husband's currently training to be a forensic psychologist, and it's like the most amazing thing to me
That's
because
so
it's like, yeah, I know. I was like, everything you find out, just feedback to me. So yeah, I'm really, yeah.
there you go.
No, I was just going to say, I'm really excited to get back to some of my dark books because I haven't written dark in a while. And it's just that, like, they're probably my favorite books to write because I just love the kind of weird and wonderful world of that kind of genre.
Do you know what I find interesting? I'm not stereotyping, but a little bit right now. But one thing that fascinates me is I find the real like bubbly, bright personality. Like I would consider myself as the same, and I've just turned to the dark side, and I love it.
Oh,
Thrive.
yeah.
And how like, but thank you, thank you. But what shocks me is it's like these really bubbly personalities delve into something super dark and super like dangerous, and then you're like looking at the book, and then you're looking at the author, and you're just like, have I been catfished? Like, what is
Yeah,
happening?
totally. I wrote a book called Sick Fucks, which is it got banned. It was that dark. And it's kind of like I mean it ironically is a cult favorite now, and it's probably the book Bar Boy Kisses I sign the most of, and the Handmen. Like in signings, people, if they're allowed to bring another book to a signing apart from the one I'm there for, or if I'm doing a like convention stuff, um it's always Sick Books. It's always Sick Books because it's so, and they're always like, I can't equate you with this book, and I'm like, I think it's, I always say this, I love writing because you get to be in the mind of something you're not.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
see
I
what I
love
mean?
that.
If
Yeah.
you're a bubbly, happy person who has actually a lovely life, to me, the intriguing part about dark romance is I ain't ever going to live that life. I'm not a biker chick who's escaped a cult, or I'm not, I'm not a serial killer who, wants to go and get revenge on the people who wronged me. So it's yet,
I was
but
gonna say,
I'm like, I think that's why you get that. I don't know about yourself. Obviously, you said you see yourself that way too, but like, I think sometimes purely writing what you know can get a little bit mundane. And if you've been in this industry for a long time, you want to go, I want to dive into something that's not me. But I think because most of my books in some way are something I studied at university, religion wise, which you wouldn't always get from my books, but it was the trigger for me.
love that.
Uh, because a lot of the things I studied, it was very much more the darker side, if you like, of that kind of world. That was always kind of my preference. Again, I think it was like I love learning about faith and religion, but when you start learning about like dangerous cults and sects and stuff like that, you go, whoa, I didn't even know this world existed. You're living in your happy bubble and you find out, oh, real life actually is very hard for some people. Naively, but yes. And so yeah, I think that's where it came from for me personally. I was just like, let me write about some of this stuff that I don't think so many people said to me, I would never have believed that cult existed. And I was like, it did exist. And many still do. You just don't know about it.
Interesting. I love that. It's like, meh.
Yeah.
What? We just went on a bit of a tangent, didn't we?
I
But like, tell us more. Talk about the dark stuff. Let's
know.
go.
Yeah.
What? What is the song that best describes you then?
Oh my gosh.
I don't know why, but the song, like, the song is like "Suddenly I See."
8 ton stuff. Yes, I love it. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I don't know. Do you know what it is? I grew up doing musical theatre, so it's going to have to be something like that. Probably defying gravity
Love that. That's a
from
good one.
Wicked. Yeah, because as much as I try and toe the line, I can't help but step out of it every now and again.
Yeah, I got that from the last question. Delicious cut. Let's go.
Yeah, yeah. I think I've got a
Well,
bit of a rebellious side. Yeah,
I love it while it's working for you, and you're
yeah,
reading it as well.
yeah.
What is a unique talent or skill set that you have that not a lot of people know about?
That I'm a trained singer, probably.
Yeah, that is there anywhere that people can see videos or anything like
Oh, I'm sure there is somewhere from my teenage performances. It's funny actually because when my thyroid started getting bad, it affected my voice and still does to this day. So that was quite a hard pill to swallow actually. I remember um saying to my doctor, like, I know it sounds silly, but I said just singing in the car, I can't hit the same notes anymore. And he was like, yeah, sometimes that can happen because obviously it surrounds your vocal cords. So if my thyroid ever flares up and I feel quite poorly with it when that happens, it can press on your vocal cords. So I have a croaky voice quite a lot of the time, even without the concert last night. I'm talking most of the day. But so that's been a little bit sad in some ways, but at the same time, it's still there. I can still hold a tune. It's just probably not as strong. But I have a new voice with writing, so it's kind of like, well,
I love that. What a good end note. I have had so much fun with you today. Let us know what is coming out. What do we need to be on the lookout for? And most importantly, where do we find you?
okay, so I am currently contracted to 3 books. The one I am delving into now is another tearjerker, another YA tearjerker that will be out similar time next year. I can't tell you much about it, but I honestly, it's gorgeous, hugely like life affirming and inspirational. And I actually think it's going to be one of the strongest storylines I've ever written. I'm so excited to write it, very nervous because it is sad. And I get put through the ringer with sad books as well as the reader, but I think the concept of it's absolutely stunning. I can't wait to talk about it, which I'm not allowed. And then I actually have a duet I am contracted to write. It's a little bit different for me, and it'll be a nice little break from um, the really deep, dark, like the tearjerker stuff. And then I will definitely be getting back to my dark stuff, which I know a huge amount of the readers watching this will be waiting for me to say. So I will be making my way back to dark romance in an indie capacity, which is nice because it means once I've written it, I can just chuck it out. Um, and then, yeah, so you can find me Instagram, Facebook. I'm mainly Instagram girl. I'm a millennial. TikTok scares the life out of me. It's got upsides and it's got downsides. I do have a TikTok account. I'm thinking about making that more of a behind the scenes on the film account. So I'm over there as author Tillie Cole, but that might be changing maybe to it'll probably still be author Tillie Cole, but it'll be probably just going to be following more behind the scenes stuff when the film's actually in production.
Are we allowed to ask when? Do you know when the filming's going to start?
No, so we're script writing right now. I've actually just asked the producer this morning because he was emailing me last night, and I was just trying to get a schedule pinned down for my own kind of like yearly outlook or whatever. Um, yeah, so I actually genuinely don't know. I just know we're in the script writing. I'm not writing the script. I'm leaving that to Liz, who's amazing. But we've had a lot of conversations, and she definitely is intent on keeping the book and the film very close together as much as we possibly can. Um, so yeah, I should be getting the first draft of that not too far off, which is just insane. And then after that, I don't know this industry whatsoever. I'm like, it's hilarious to me. I have no idea what I'm doing with this film world, but it'll be fun to go through it, I'm sure.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Who knows? Maybe we'll get you back on next year to hear everything
Yes,
about it. And
definitely.
congratulations, so well deserved. And what an exciting part of the journey now. It's like a little
Oh
side
yeah.
quest unlocked.
That's what I keep saying. I was like, if this is the only book that ever gets made into a film, I just want to enjoy it
Yeah.
and enjoy the process. And then, but ultimately the writing is always priority. It's just a nice little segue for a bit. It's
Little
the
change of
casting
pace.
I can't wait for. It's the casting.
Yeah.
I was like, I just want to sit there and have, and I know this is total fantasy, but I'm trying to do law of attraction and put it out there. I just want to be sat in the room when we see all the actors and actresses because I'm executive producing it, which is hilarious. But it means I get a say in, trying to keep it as close to like what me and the fans want as possible. Um, I just want Rune and Poppy to walk in. I just know it's them. I want that moment where I go, that's you. You are Rune. You are Poppy. We're done. I don't know if that'll happen, but I'm putting that out there. I'm putting it out there. So,
Oh, I'm so excited to hear the progress.
yeah.
This is awesome. And so everyone make sure you're following that TikTok account because I'm sure there'll be updates soon.
Yes, I know. As soon as we get some track, like as soon as there's something to say, we're definitely going to start putting stuff up. Yeah.
Yay! Well, for now, guys, we're going to love you and leave you, but make sure to check that out. Bye, guys.
Bye.